Really, the theme of today's discussion is just doing more with less, right? I think obviously the climate as it is and the market has shifted. It's put us all on the back foot a little bit. We've all had to change quite a lot. And I think hopefully you've all done a cracking job of doing that. I think hopefully we're here to add a bit of context to that discussion, to talk about the challenges that we're seeing across sort of the broader market, and again, to kind of hear from some first-hand experience there. So I guess to kick us off with some introductions, I would butcher this. So Laura, do you want to introduce yourself, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So my name is Laura Bello, and I head up the talent acquisition function within JT. And JT is a telecoms company. We're based in Jersey, but we've got global offices.
Thanks, Laura. And I'm Tom from Pinpoint. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of the business. We build talent acquisition software, as was introduced to you earlier, and we work with clients sort of all over the world. So we have a fairly interesting perspective. Obviously, we're based here in the UK and deal with a lot of UK businesses of all different shapes and sizes, but also 48 other countries. And as I say, that gives us a kind of very interesting perspective on not just the challenges that the broader market is seeing, but also sort of what types of organizations are tackling these problems in different ways. And hopefully we can kind of learn and get a bit of a wisdom of the crowds type setup going here today. So that's who we are. I think, as I say, I'm going to give us a brief run through of a few things today. To kind of summarize that, we're going to talk very briefly about what the market looks like currently. I think you'll all be aware of some of the challenges that you're facing, and I think I just want to add a little bit of kind of clarity to that and talk about some of the things we've seen across the market. We're going to talk a little bit about a few high-level ideas you guys can use to sort of recruit effectively given constraints that you have right now, be it increased candidate volume, reduced budgets, sort of harder stakeholder management given the climate. And then we're going to learn from Laura, and I'm going to try and get out of the way as much as I can and just let Laura kind of tell you all the good things that she and the team at JT have done, implementing a lot of these strategies, both kind of pre the COVID environment and during, and we'll sort of learn from that. So carrying on, I think in the beginning here, we'll talk a little bit about the market, and I think really that we would sort of summarize the position everyone's in right now as three things, right? You're expected to do more with less, budgets are cut, people are finding the market very difficult, there's more candidates around than there's ever been, and it's quite difficult to build that business case for change. I think we hear a lot from recruitment teams that they're used to relying on external recruiters or recruitment agencies or other sources of quite expensive sort of talent acquisition, and they're being asked to move away from those channels into more of a direct hiring approach, which we think is fantastic long term, but sometimes a difficult transition short term. And we're also hearing that organizations are finding it difficult to get budget to instigate that change. I think people are being asked to just cut those fees and not being given a digital budget to go and do programmatic or go and use more job boards or go and look at different channels of acquisition. Obviously, there's challenges there, and we're here to talk about perhaps how we might be able to help you solve some of those challenges. And so, yeah, like that's kind of where we're seeing the market right now. And I think we can dig into those things. So as we say, budgets are being cut across the board. I think nobody really, well, I'll say it because I'm allowed to say it, but nobody really seems to like working with agencies. We all know that they're expensive. We all know that they're not necessarily the best ways of building direct relationships with candidates long term. And we all know that they make it difficult to build long-term talent pipelines. But they solve a real problem. There's definitely a place for agencies at the sort of higher end of the market. And a lot of organizations find it difficult to transition away, not just because of the cost base or because of the kind of workload involved, but because some of them haven't ever recruited without agency support. And that is a big transition. You need to learn how to do what the agency was previously doing for you. And if you can support that transition and execute on it, you'll really win in a very competitive market, but nevertheless, that's very difficult. And I think the reality is we're seeing a lot of people cutting those budgets considerably. We're seeing a lot of people struggling to unlock additional budget to use on different channels and campaigns. And so they're trying to have to work out, how do I get in front of the right people and give them a candidate experience that we're proud of with little to sometimes no budget, right? And I'm identifying the problems right now. We'll talk about some solutions in a few minutes. So problem one, lack of or no budget at all. Problem two, tough to justify a business case. We talked about this a minute ago, but I think the reality is that if we're going to cut budget completely from agencies or from your existing kind of primary source of candidates, be that specific job boards, be that third-party recruiters, RPO, whatever, what we need to try and do is unlock some of that budget and some of that saving and deploy it elsewhere. I think there's lots we can do in terms of easy wins to get us over the hurdle of a short-term recruitment problem. But what we need to be doing is repositioning your organization long-term to support continued successful direct hiring. And that means, trying to get business cases put together, perhaps for new systems or for employee value proposition work, or for employer branding stuff, or candidate experience improvements. Frankly, again, there's lots that can be done here, and we're sort of here to help, and Laura can give us some examples of how she's done this herself within her own organization. And so again, seeing this problem a lot. And third, and we see this a lot, and I think we saw quite a lot of pre-questions come through in terms of you all signing up, which was super helpful, and we'll tackle a lot of those as we go. But we're getting a lot of feedback right now that organizations are just inundated with candidate volume because of the unfortunate kind of unemployment situation we see in most markets right now. Again, the challenge here is you're being asked to find the right people amongst a much larger candidate pool than you've used to have, and you're being asked to do that without third-party support or without different systems or processes and procedures, and getting you to navigate these kind of very murky waters whilst also implementing new things, dealing with significant candidate volume, sometimes means the byproduct is you're offering inferior candidate experiences, your team is snowed under dealing with candidates that aren't qualified and stuff like that. Obviously, this is a problem, and we really strongly believe that you want to be giving every one of these candidates a world-class experience because it'll benefit you longer term. But that's easier said than done. And we'll talk a little bit about how we see you being able to solve some of those challenges as well. So those are the sort of high-level 3 problems that we've seen. I think to tackle a little on kind of where we think you can be doing things with little to no budget, to kind of demonstrate some wins to the business through this time. I guess we'd start with these kind of 3 main things, and we'll talk about these as we go. But fundamentally, looking at your candidate experience, there's often a lot of mistakes being made here, bluntly, and there's lots of kind of low-hanging fruit opportunity to significantly improve the quality of the candidate experience, both for the candidate, but also in terms of the information you're seeing out of the back of this that's going to kind of help you make those intelligent selection decisions at scale. And so we'll talk a little about how we can evaluate your candidate experiences. I think we can look at evaluating other channels, and the argument here is that I think a lot of you have kind of fallen into the comfort zone of using 1 or 2 main channels to recruit the vast majority of your talent. That's great, and if it works. I think the reality is that these days channel diversification is kind of the name of the game, and you want to make sure you're not relying on one specific source of candidates across the board, and there's more that you can be doing. And we'll talk a little about where there's easy wins and where there's sort of some things you can do even temporarily to reduce your cost to hire without degrading the quality of your candidates, and sort of use that to justify some investment elsewhere. And then third and finally, we'll talk about how you can then demonstrate savings to the business and use those demonstrable savings to hopefully justify a small scale reinvestment in other areas of your recruitment ecosystem, be that new systems, be that employer branding, be that longer term content, be that talent pipeline. All of those things will help you come out of this sort of storm in a much better position, both A, short term in terms of keeping things going with reduced budgets, but B, even longer term when things sort of turn around again and the market starts to look a bit more healthy. All of these things are things that these kind of world-class recruitment organizations are doing. And I think if we can use sort of the period we're going through now to justify some of that transition, we'll all do quite well. So tackling this real quick, I think in the first instance, reviewing your candidate experience. So we talk about this a lot here at Pinpoint because we just see so much utter terrible kind of candidate journeys that are being offered. I think there's so many things you can do to make life easier here, and hopefully Laura can talk to some of the differences she's seen kind of as she's improved the candidate experience that they now have, which is fantastic. But again, there's so many kind of quick wins, right? Like look at your careers website. Has it been updated in the past 10 years? If it hasn't, start there, right? Look at your messaging, look at your photography, look at your application experience. Like, do these things reflect an employer brand experience that you're proud of? How many hoops are you making your candidates jump through? Do they need to sign up for accounts before they can apply for a role? If they do, you're going to lose about 70% of your candidates before you've even started. Does your application experience work on a mobile phone? If it doesn't, you're going to lose about 55% of your candidates before you've even started. How many questions are you asking? Are you making it super simple? Are you gathering the right kinds of information so you can set up filters and disqualify people that you wouldn't be able to employ anyway? For example, they might not be entitled to work in the UK, or they might not have qualifications that are required by the role. Like, there's lots you can do here to help both sides of this ecosystem. And I think we'll give you lots of resources in terms of follow-up material of things you can do at absolutely no cost that will make a considerable difference here. And so, yeah, really start at the candidate experience, because frankly, everything else is irrelevant. You don't want what we call a leaky bucket, right? So what you don't want to end up with is a sort of supercharged talent acquisition model where you're driving fantastically qualified candidates from loads of different sources to your candidate experience, your careers website, and they're all dropping out of the funnel because you have a leaky bucket, i.e. like your careers website's not doing a job of converting your candidates. Everything else is a waste of time until you sort this problem out. And we've fortunately got lots of resources to help you with that. So fundamentally start there. And again, none of this stuff has to be expensive. There's things you can do yourself at no cost with no support. Secondly, think about new sourcing channels. So again, we've talked a lot about this before, and we've talked about how people tend to just use one or two main channels. That might be agencies, that might be a specific job board, it might be, I don't know, some programmatic partner of some variety. I think the reality is that there'll always be roles that you're recruiting for that will be easier to fill than others. And I think for those roles, they're an especially good candidate for some channel experimentation. And so if you're just using agencies or you're just using Indeed or sort of those very generic large scale job boards, by all means continue to do that, but also perhaps think about additional channels. And so when we talk about additional stuff, we might think about employee referral schemes. Like you can create employee referral schemes basically for nothing, and the cost is contingent, so it's easier to justify to other stakeholders in the business. It also makes your employees happier and is statistically more likely to result in a retained longer term successful candidate. So think about what you can be doing on the employee referral side to incentivize people. And frankly, there's a lot of unemployment in the market right now. A lot of those unemployed candidates are fantastically qualified people, and their friends will want to help them find new opportunities. So now is a time to be considering employee referral schemes and sort of supporting that rollout within the business. Think about your job board strategy. So again, if you're just using Indeed or Monster or Glassdoor or a kind of very generic job board, again, we partner with those. We think they're fantastic platforms, but they don't always necessarily find you those niche candidates. I think what we'd encourage you to do from a job board perspective is evaluate specific kind of more targeted job board platforms. So if you're recruiting engineers, go for Stack Overflow or for GitHub or for Dice or other platforms targeted at that type of professional. If you're recruiting people to work remotely, think about We Work Remotely and remote.io and job boards focused on that niche. Whatever the type of individual you're trying to recruit for, chances are very, very high that there'll be a job board that's more focused on that cohort than the Indeeds and the Glassdoors, and you tend to see a different profile of candidate apply through those channels. Here at Pinpoint, we have over 1,500 job board integrations, and we see them get used, right? And so the reality is that there are thousands of boards in the marketplace. A lot of them are free. Go look at what's out there and experiment. It costs you nothing but time in a lot of instances to try these things out, and I think you'll see a different type of individual come through those channels. And then think about programmatic. And so when we talk about programmatic, we mean paid ads on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Google. There's a bunch of different channels out there, and the cost to hire through these platforms can be incredibly low depending on the type of individual that you're trying to recruit for. Experiment with those. If they're roles that you think are easier to fill than others, try a Facebook ad for £100. There's a lot you can do to get yourselves in front of a different type of candidate on their terms. And at work, best case scenario, you're attracting qualified talent. Worst case scenario, what you're going to do is get your employer brand out there in a very targeted fashion in front of the types of people that you're interested in hiring. And they might not apply today, but they'll apply in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, whatever. So what we're really saying here is go take some of those roles that you know that you can hire, and instead of spending that agency fee or instead of spending an RPO contractual relationship or whatever you're doing, think about diverting that to a cheaper channel. It'll get you in front of a different cohort, and it'll allow you to demonstrate some key savings very quickly to the rest of the business. So there's a few ideas on sourcing. And then finally, before we kind of transition to some actual kind of from the trenches stories here, I think how can we demonstrate those savings, right? So again, we see this and we see a lot of organizations, and we've seen this firsthand with our own clients sort of at the beginning of our journey, where they'll go back to their stakeholders and they'll be really proud of, oh, we've saved £10,000 on that hire we didn't use an agency for, or we saved 50 grand over the past 3 months on those non-agency based hires. And the CFO sort of chortles and is very happy about putting that money somewhere else. I think the reality is that you need to work hard to demonstrate why that is a poor use of those savings, and why you can continue to demonstrate savings long-term and scalably if you can just take even a component part of some of the savings that you've been able to demonstrate and allocate them somewhere else. And so again, you need to look at the reporting that you can get out of your talent acquisition platform or your sourcing platform or whatever you're using from a recruitment perspective. And obviously there's different levels of reporting there, but any system that you're using should be able to give you some data around kind of cost to hire and source of hire and source attribution and things like that, if they can't change. And so the idea is what you want to be doing here is demonstrating with data to your management team, to your stakeholders, to whoever dictates what your budget is. This is what we've been able to do in terms of redeploying, but this is not a strategy that will apply evenly across the rest of the business. And in order to bring these numbers down longer term, what I need to do is take 25% or 50% of the savings that I'm demonstrating here and spend them on longer term initiatives. And that might mean a review of our employer brand. That might mean more content that we can distribute out into the market, like video or social content. That might mean advertising specifically targeted at our talent pipeline to get more people registering their interest speculatively into working for our business, such that in 3 months or 6 months or a year, when we have a new role, we're not starting from scratch, right? We have 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people in a talent pipeline that are interested in working for our business. And that will be able to allow us to demonstrate a reduced time to hire, reduced cost to hire, and so on and so forth. And so we'll talk in the questions and answers, just because I'm keen to kind of get over to Laura, because this is why you're all here. But there's lots you can do, and there's lots we can help you with, again, without being a Pinpoint customer, in terms of how should you be telling that story to the rest of the business, and what should you be kind of pitching for in terms of new budget. So there's a few ideas. I think what I'm going to do now is stop sharing my screen, because you don't need to look at these tiny pictures of our faces. Laura and I can have a bit of a chat about how she's done this well, and then we'll talk about sort of next steps and how we can help and get to some actual questions. So Laura, do you want to give us a bit of a story as to how you've done this yourself at JT?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tom. So what I'll do is I'll kind of talk through some of the challenges I was faced at JT, and I don't think any of them will come as a surprise to any of you out there, really. So we were heavily reliant on agencies. Between 70 and 80% of all our recruitment came through agencies, which was costly. And actually, any direct applicants we had who were applying, we were actually losing over 70% of those were dropping out because our application process was laborious, to say the least. We weren't doing enough recruitment marketing, so actually, we had very low levels of direct hires as well. And then kind of more, on the actual HR admin team, the systems we were using and the process was very time consuming for them. And actually that was having a knock-on effect to our hiring managers who were just kind of getting frustrated, if I'm honest, and saying, it's taking too long, Laura, to fill these vacancies. What is going on? So kind of I was moved into the role within JT to kind of see if what I could do to resolve some of the feedback we were getting. And it became very clear. So whilst we are predominantly in the Channel Islands, and that's where our headquarters are, we actually have global presence. However, no one actually knew who we were as a brand outside of the Channel Islands. And actually, even within the Channel Islands, people knew who we were from a customer side of things, but we didn't talk anywhere about who we were as an employer. So actually, the first area I had to focus on was our employer value proposition. Looking at our careers site, it was basically just a list of jobs. Our social media accounts were all about customers. There was nothing about who we were as an employer. So what I did was actually just carried out some very quick, it wasn't expensive, internal research with, people who actually worked for JT, people who'd been with us a long time, and then also people who had recently joined us. And I wanted to get a real feel for what it was like to work at JT. Because what I wanted to do was kind of portray who we were as an employer, but it was really important to me that it was true. What I didn't want was some kind of marketing spin on it. So when people did join us, they actually truly felt what I was portraying out there. And it had to be honest. And actually, our organisation is not for everyone. And that's okay. That's okay for us. But we want to make sure that people who do join us almost know what they're joining. So that was the first part. And then secondly, I also carried out some external research. Again, just myself kind of looking at our competitors and what were other people doing. As if I was almost a candidate, saying, okay, what could I find out about other organisations? And then compared that to what I could find out about JT. It wasn't pretty reading. In fact, there was pretty much nothing about JT as an employer. So in a way, I was kind of in a good place to actually make some improvements. So that was the first step in kind of our journey. looking at our careers site, looking at things that we produce, so annual reviews, social media. But again, it was important for me that it was actually our people. So we wanted to have, a real face behind our brand. So we absolutely used our employees. So we did videos with our employees and photos and had testimonials from real people who worked for us. Again, just to kind of bring out that human side and that real people side of our branding. And then I kind of, had to work alongside marketing to make sure that it was kind of all aligned. So anyone who's starting this work, I would absolutely get marketing on board, but my piece of advice is don't do the marketing spin. Do it from a HR perspective, from a candidate perspective, because it does have to be kind of true. So once I'd kind of got all that in place and kind of did all the videos and pictures and so forth, what kind of struck me was actually talking to people who worked for us was actually how proud they were to work for JT, and actually how they would recommend us to their friends and family. So the first thing I did straight off on the back of that was, as Tom's alluded to, was I introduced employee referral schemes. Again, it was very simple. I didn't actually make them kind of, go through any kind of system. It was just, if you've got a friend, family member who you think would be good for one of our jobs, just email me the CV along, with your note that you're referring them. And then we did, at that point, the budget wasn't massive. So we just did very small referral payments, dependent on the level of the role. But actually, people almost wanted to recommend their friends and family anyway. So the fact they kind of got a small monetary amount was almost a bonus to them. And actually that's continued to work really well. And again, we've been able to kind of increase the referral fees on that because it is working really well for us. And actually we can see the retention of people who get referred from existing employees is a lot higher, which is great. So during the work I did on the employee value proposition, it became very apparent that our candidate experience was awful, and hence, I guess, why we had such a bad dropout rate. It was very difficult for people to apply for a job. It would take way too long. As Tom kind of said, it would registering an account, and I needed to know every single bit of detail about them. I really didn't. So what I wanted to do was to look at a different system, but it was kind of really important for me. I didn't just want another application tracking system. For me, I wanted, bearing in mind, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I'm spending a lot of money with agencies. I was looking for a tool and technology that would help me source these candidates. We're not a big HR team. I don't have, a great big recruiter team to be trawling various kind of professional networks looking for candidates. I needed technology to kind of help me. And that's where I discovered Pinpoint. So we've worked with Pinpoint now for just a year now. And they helped us with the bringing to life our careers site, again, very much with our employee value proposition in the back of their mind as well, that, we had to have the people element. And then we use them obviously now for our sourcing of our candidates. And it was quite a shift, to be honest, for the organisation. I'm not going to lie here and say, it was easy, because it wasn't, because actually the mentality of our organisation, our hiring managers, was very much the default position was go to an agency, please, Laura. So it did take some education for them to understand. But I did have the stakeholder buy-in from both actually the CEO and the CFO, which did help. And so one of the methods I kind of very much used was, you know what, guys, let me try doing some direct sourcing for a week. And if you don't have the candidates that you're looking for in a week, then fine, I will go to the agency for you. But actually, good news was, no, we didn't actually need to go to the agency. So with the help of Pinpoint, we could find these candidates directly. And for us, it was all about, going to the right places. So we do a lot of kind of sponsored adverts through social media. But it's about, a lot of the roles at JT can be quite niche. So we've got some, call center, retail roles, which have high volume, but we've also got a lot of niche roles, so a lot of software developers, where they're not looking on the standard job boards. So we actually had to work with Pinpoint to go out and find these people. What are they looking at? What games are they playing? What websites are they looking at? How do we get in front of them? And that's, that's something I had absolutely no experience of whatsoever. So I was very kind of reliant on Tom and his team to help with that, which they did. And again, it was all around looking at sometimes some of the wording we used in some of our adverts, some of the images we used, what does attract the type of people we were looking for, and those kind of the changes we had to make. As I said, we've had Pinpoint now for a year, and it kind of speaks volumes that actually 90% of our recruitment now comes direct. So it's only a very small minority that I have to use an agency for. And it's the headhunter type roles. It's the very senior. We've just recruited for a CFO and roles like that. So it's not our standard roles that that we would using. That all comes direct. As I kind of touched on, as it wasn't all plain sailing. So the managers were actually the biggest hurdle, and we had to do a lot of education for them. One, to actually to see the value in direct sourcing, and actually as well for them to understand that they had to sell themselves and JT as much as the candidate had to us. And obviously these were pre-COVID times, so we're very there wasn't as as many candidates out there as there is now. But we very much had to re-educate managers to say, what, during this whole recruitment process, you have to be selling yourself. Why would someone want to come and work for you? Make it personal. And one element that really helped with that is on our adverts, you'll see, if anyone wants to go and have a look at them, there's a hiring manager profile, which brings it to life. So it's no longer just this JT brand. It's actually the person. This is who you're going to go and work for. You're going to go and work for Laura Bello. This is who she is. We get them to talk about things that are personal. What's their journey? How did they join JT? What are they interested in? Because actually, as you're going to work for that person. It has to work for you. And it worked really well for us. And actually, it's been so successful that our CEO has given the remit, actually, that basically said, Laura, if people do not provide you with their hiring manager profiles, you are not to advertise their vacancy. So he completely endorsed it. And again, it's working really well for us. We get brilliant feedback from candidates saying, I really like that element, because then they go and look them up on various social media sites, and really find out who they are. And then also what we did was managers was encourage them to share our jobs. So it was always seen as a bit of a, oh no, you have to be careful, sharing things on social media when you work for JT. But actually we kind of took a step back and said, actually, why? Yes, managers, please go out, share the jobs. And again, I kind of run a little bit of a competition in-house to say, actually, you know what? The person who shares the most jobs is going to get a voucher. And it just seemed to kind of drum up that, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to start sharing all the jobs, because people are genuinely proud to work for JT and they do want other people to kind of come and work for us as well. And again, it just added that human element. It doesn't cost anything for them to share a job, and it cost me 50 quid voucher, and I got loads of applicants. So that was good. The reservations that people had, and it's probably an area we're in now, is the volume. So if you're doing something, say for example, one of our high volume areas, so like a call center, if we put out an advert for a call center, the concern from hiring managers was, oh my God, Laura, I'm going to be overwhelmed with CVs. I just want to use an agency because they'll do the filtering. And again, I kind of had the same challenges. Let's just see what we get. And so it was very important to kind of, again, with the advert, make it very clear what you're looking for. And again, we use some of the kind of screening questions. So there's, as kind of Tom alluded, there's different rights to work and things like that. We couldn't have any licenses for people. And we kind of made that, we were kind of clear up front. And actually, if you don't have X, Y, Z, really sorry, you're not going to get through. And that's okay. Don't be afraid to kind of be clear about what you're expecting, because there's nothing worse for a candidate than going through the whole process when really they were never going to get the job anyway because they didn't meet your basic criteria. So be really clear on the job adverts, and any, obviously don't put loads of pre-screening questions in because it will put people off, but just put a couple of really tight screening questions, which again helps filter out those people who actually might not be suitable for the role. But even those people that maybe did apply and weren't suitable, managers were saying the system was easy to use. So actually to either reject people or move them on, although they may have had a volume still, it was so simple and quick to do that actually it didn't take them long at all. And even better than that was the fact that we owned this talent now. So previously, an agency, you know, we'd put out a call at a centre vacancy with an agency, they send us loads of CVs, lo and behold, a month later, I'm recruiting again for another call agent and I have to start all over again. Now I don't. I have got a whole talent pool of people who have applied for a job before, and okay, they haven't been successful this time, but we can easily mark them and go, yes, they are talent. We would hire them if we had another role. So we have even got to position, you know, in our, you know, our kind of higher turnover areas where I don't need to advertise anymore. I can just go into my talent pool and find these people and say, hey, you're still available, which again is a kind of another great experience from a candidate's point of view, that, you know, we are proactively approaching these people. And I guess, and the final kind of point from me is around the HR team. So the administration for recruitment has dropped dramatically, which is brilliant from the HR team, and especially kind of during these COVID times when, you know, unfortunately, we had to have some reductions. And what it's allowed me to do is to really focus the HR team now on, rather than spending their time, you know, trawling through CVs and setting up interviews, which used to take a lot of time. It no longer does with Pinpoint. Again, that's a massive saving on time for us, and actually just the candidate experience. There's nothing more frustrating than a candidate than an admin team going back and forth, trying to sort out an interview. Whereas actually kind of you're putting the onus onto the candidate and saying, you know what, this is when the interview panel are available, book your slot. So what the HR team do now is spend a lot more time looking at some of the wording on our adverts, very conscious around kind of our diversity and inclusion. Hands up, a lot of our adverts will use quite male-orientated wording. So actually we've now spent some time looking at that and make sure we are kind of really attracting a diversity and inclusive kind of candidate pool. And then also one area we're now looking at is doing some blogs. So rather than us always just pushing, I'm hiring content out to our talent pools, we're now looking at actually how can we engage with these talent pools just on various specialist subjects. You know, we've got a lot of specialists within JT, just get them to write an article about something that may interest these, you know, software developers, for an example, is a prime area that, you know, we have a lot of recruitment in. You know, let's not just go out, you know, they may not respond to an advert that says, hi, I'm hiring. Actually, they may respond to a blog about something, the latest technology or whatever it is. I'm not technical. Actually, just get them to engage with you through that. So I'm now using the HR team to work with the business to write these kind of blogs to get them to engage with another kind of talent pool, really. So kind of I'll stop talking now. But the kind of key takeaways that I kind of wanted people to, you know, to take from this is actually having a clear and true and honest employee value proposition, and make sure that is shown across all of your channels. So make it consistent, make it real, use your people. Use your existing employees and managers to help promote your organization and encourage them to share kind of any jobs or anything else that you have with their network. Use technology and data to source your candidates. I mean, Tom will probably can go into more detail about how they use kind of data behind the scenes to then go out and go, okay, someone you've hired, you know, this is where they work, you know, this is their interest. So actually next time, Laura, you're hiring for someone like that, we know we can go target this area, things they look at. And make your job adverts compelling. You know, you have to sell what you are offering to a candidate. It's no longer just, we're looking for X, Y, Z, have you got it? It's actually, what can you offer that candidate? What is different about your organization? And again, be honest, because otherwise you won't retain people. If you say you're this amazing organization with, I don't know, ping pong table and a swimming pool, yada, 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 and they join and they don't have it, it's nothing more off-putting for a candidate. So you know what? Say who you are, and if people want to join you, they will. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much to both Laura and Tom for your insights there. So really interesting stuff, and it sounds like you've gone through quite a journey, Laura. So well done. I'm sure there's lots still to be done. It's one of those things, isn't it, that it's never ending, really. It's always sort of moving forward. So we do have a few questions. Kat, I might save you one for the second question. I think it might be a tricky one to go straight into. But one of the questions that we have been asked, and we quite often get asked, is from Daniel, and it's the biggest change in candidate behaviour, but also expectations since COVID has happened. And I don't know, Laura or Tom, who would be best to take that one. But what have you seen candidates expect and actually behave since lockdown?
Do you want to take that, Laura, or are you happy for me to jump in?
You can jump in on that one.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess I'd say two key themes, right? So one is volume, and two is transparency and authenticity. And I think Laura did a great job of explaining that. But the first thing I'd say is that normally, in a lot of instances, there's like a relatively equal split between the current position and the current state of candidates applying for roles. So there's always people who are currently kind of unemployed looking for new opportunities, and we understand that, and that's always a kind of cohort within the application pool. There's a lot more of that now than there normally is. Like normally you see a lot of people evaluating job changes rather than an opportunity to solve a short-term problem. And so what we're seeing a lot of at the moment is sort of candidates applying for far more roles than they traditionally would simultaneously, because they're really looking for any opportunity, because we all have families to support and mortgages to pay and all of the other good stuff there. And so I think you're seeing the candidates' expectations be slightly different, because they want to be able to apply quicker, they need to get out in front of more people, they need more nudging and reminding, they want access to job descriptions again, they want to kind of remind themselves what they're applying for, and they want to be spoken to very promptly. It's sort of like almost a race to the bottom in terms of communication velocity. And so I think candidate behavior is different, and obviously people are quite panicked right now, people are finding the situation very stressful, and so it's less of a wouldn't it be nice to go work for JT, and more like I really hope JT responds to me immediately because I'm in a dire situation. And so I think we all need to be sensitive of that. I think it's very easy, especially for some of us who have significant scale or applicant volumes and things like that, to just think of these people in our applicant tracking system as just like another row in a spreadsheet or another number. Like all of these people are real people that have real situations they need to sort out, and changing job irrelevant of circumstances like a massive deal for anybody at any point. And so I think we always need to be cognizant of that. The other thing I'd say is candidates have always valued transparency, but I think more so now than ever before. And I think Laura really hit the nail on the head in terms of authenticity. But candidates don't need super polished professional photography and super produced videos with stings and fancy animations and all that stuff. They just want to know what their desk's going to look like, and who's going to sit to the left of them and who's going to sit to the right of them, and whether their boss is like smelly or really pleasant or really good at what they do or horrendous as a human being. Like they want authenticity, and they're doing more research. They're looking at Glassdoor more than they've ever done. They're looking at reviews of people. They're trying to understand the sort of ethics and morals of the organizations that they're signing up to work for and take advantage of the situation. And I just think organizations that are putting more out there, and I genuinely, I'd rather a member of our team filled something on their phone and walked around the office and talked to some people by tapping them on the shoulder than I would have this super fancy produced video set up right now. And so there's two very long answers to that very short question. Sorry about that.
No, absolutely. So in terms of for recruiters at the moment, is it just having that transparency on the job ad, or is it having it within the sort of communication that you then have with the candidates at sort of all points within the journey?
My view is it's at every touch point. So I think, as Laura said, and she was really focusing on sort of the employer branding and the career site and the job descriptions and all of those things, all super important. I think it's also important to be consistent throughout. So what does their interview process look like? What does their actual applicant experience look like? What does the communication that they receive look like? I think we've also seen a lot of backlash in the industry at the moment from organizations that are recruiting for like ghost roles, i.e. like a lot of organizations will have evergreen roles that they're always recruiting for, and they've still got them on their website even though they're not hiring. And candidates right now are panicked, and they're trying to find opportunities, and it's very frustrating for them when they apply for a role that doesn't actually exist and you're not recruiting for that. So I think just be wary of like, what does the other side of the table want from the experience you're putting out, and what are they expecting, and how are we going to let them down if this is the approach we take? And I think just be wary of that. Like this is an investment of time and energy people are putting into working with your business, and you want them to have a good experience and not a bad one.
And I think just to kind of add on to that, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of really, highlight who you are as an organization through that experience. So yes, we have seen an increase in volume in some of our roles, and kind of like Tom alluded to, you know, it's people who are almost just applying. You can see them, they're applying for almost every role we have. But actually what we've tried to do is then maybe engage with them a bit more, and kind of offer a bit more of a different service to them, saying, you know what, actually, you know what, you're not suitable for this role, but actually, do you want some help? Do you want a career chat? Do you want help with your CV? Do you want help with some interviews? Again, just to differentiate ourselves as an organization, and just to show that empathy. Really, we understand it's tough out there at the minute. So actually, when things, you know, do pick up, you know, hopefully those candidates will be the ones that remember, oh, okay, yeah, I applied to JT. They treated me really well, really consistently, fairly, and actually gave me something other organizations hadn't offered me, which is, you know, the support. I might not be able to give you the job, but you know what else, what other expertise can I kind of give you? You know, be it interview, be it help with the CV. Again, and it's just, you know, it's the, you know, our HR team are able to provide that at the moment, you know, during this kind of period.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is actually at this time you might be able to offer that resource, and it's not something that you're going to be able to offer sort of forevermore. You know, and there's lots of sort of tools and technologies and options to sort of help with some of that automation, where, you know, some of the roles go like skyrocket. You're not going to be able to have those conversations with every single person. Okay, we're going to hit you with a tough question now, which Kat put in at 10:04. So what metrics or KPIs are best to measure quality of hire? And I think it's such a tough one, and so if anyone's got a response to that, would be great. But I don't know how you measure quality of hire, Laura.
Yeah, I mean, retention is one element, but to be honest, that, you know, that's not the biggest one for us. It's all around the performance from the, you know, the hire, and we actually get feedback from the manager, and also we use kind of team members' feedback as well on the candidate, and also the candidate themselves. So we do speak to, you know, people once they're kind of generally 3-4 months in, and find out kind of how the experience is going. You know, is it, you know, aligned to what they thought it was going to be, and we continually, you know, ask for that feedback on people, and then we compare that at the end of their first year with their kind of performance rating, and actually see, you know, and it helps us with, you know, rehiring people, again, to think, okay, these type of people, you know, work in our organization, they're really successful, they're kind of our quality hires. So yeah, it's generally around the performance kind of metrics, but also through feedback from managers and team members. And we're quite open and transparent that's what we do. You know, we want it to be, you know, we want the candidate to have a great experience with us, and it'd be right for them as well as for the organization.
I assume then as well you can see where the candidates came from as well within, you know, if there's a specific job board or wherever they came from. So you're able to track that as well.
Yeah, so potentially in other organisations as well, we can see actually, is there a trend that actually people from this organisation actually do work really well in JT because we're similar, or because we're actually completely different and they were looking for something different in their previous organisation. So yeah, we use kind of all that data
to go and poach them from the other organisations. We're going to answer Pam's question. So I think, Tom, this might be one for you. And Pam was asking more specifically around hiring chefs. And chefs are notoriously a difficult sort of candidate to try and hire because there's too few, essentially. So Tom, maybe just to sort of open it up to the wider audience. So for those really specific, quite niche roles, how do you see it working best to try and attract those and actually hire and retain them as well?
Yeah, no, sure, and thank you, Pam, for asking the question. I think it's a great case study and example for, as Natasha said, a kind of broader challenge that people face. So I think Pam was talking about trying to find chefs, and we asked Pam sort of where she's advertising right now to get in front of those chefs, and she's talked about kind of using her website, using some HF Holidays, Indeed, Leisure Jobs, LinkedIn. I guess all of those things are great. I guess my only comment on that would be, I feel like what you're doing is looking at it from your perspective rather than from the end user's perspective, right? So I don't know many chefs on LinkedIn, I guess would be like the simplest way of putting it, right? Like the goal of recruitment in my mind, like we're big here at Pinpoint about this, what we call inbound recruitment, right? So you serve the candidate, not the other way around, and you've got to get in front of them where they are already spending time. I'm not a chef, but like my assumption is that chefs are like normal people, and they spend time on Facebook when they're in their break, and they spend time on Instagram, and they might spend time in WhatsApp, or insert X channel here. They're probably not in their break looking at HF holidays or looking at LinkedIn or leisure jobs, unless they're in dire need of employment. And so I guess all I would be saying to Pam, and again, this, we're using chefs as an example here, but it could frankly be anything, is understand your audience more, and understand where are they spending time, and then get your employer brand and your opportunities in front of those people where they are already spending time. So again, maybe instead of spending a bit of money on LinkedIn or spending time advertising on leisure jobs, take a small budget, run targeted Facebook ads in the region that you operate in, advertising chefs. And as Laura has told us, think about your employer value proposition. What are you offering this type of person that they aren't currently getting, right? And genuinely, you might have a really solid understanding of the type of individual you're trying to attract. And if you do, fantastic. If you don't, go ask the ones that you already employ. Where do you spend time? What do you do for fun? What do you do on the internet? What do you do on your phone? Go understand where their eyeballs already are, and then just get there. And I think people used to be scared this was prohibitively expensive. It really doesn't have to be. And there's lots you can do. And I think there's some content that we'll send in our follow-up that has nothing to do with you specifically using Pinpoint, that should give you some context as to how to sort of start positioning an inbound recruitment strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's echoed by sort of Laura's bits and pieces earlier as well, which is brilliant. There's a couple of slightly longer questions, so I'll try and read through them. But what type of strategy should be implemented for branding? And I assume that's employer branding in general. Where would you start?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think it's talking to people who work for your organisation already. As I say, I know I keep repeating myself, but it's that whole genuine honesty. Really find out what it is like, because you have to find out what is unique about yourself. What is it that you're offering that's different to your competitors? And then I'd spend some time doing the external research to find out what your competitors are doing, what they're saying, how they do it, and be different. So don't just copy what they've done. Do something different to what they're doing. And then also speak to some recent candidates, and maybe speak to people who haven't been successful actually in getting the job and things like that, and think, okay, what was it about the organization that did or didn't attract you? And even be brave. I spoke to some candidates who'd actually turned down our offers, so we'd offer them the job and actually turn them down, and usually we go, okay, fine. Actually, I was like, no, I want to understand, what is it, what wasn't right for you? And sometimes it did actually turn out that I was like, oh no, we do that. Oh no, you could have that. And oh, we are like that. We do offer that. So it became very clear, actually, I was, again, missing some things on what we were talking about as our organization. So it really is worth spending some time, and it doesn't have to be costly. I actually got some of my friends to just apply for jobs and to, be honest with me, guys. What was it like? What did you find out about JT? I kind of, again, spoke to, almost friends of friends who knew nothing about our organization in different countries. Again, to get that feedback, to say, what could you find out about us? What are you looking for in an organization? So it really is worth spending that time on the research side of things, and then linking in, as I said, you do need to be aligned with your marketing team to make sure that it is aligned with kind of your customer external brand as well. Yes, that would be my approach to it, really, and what we did that seemed to work. Yeah,
absolutely. It's lots of good sort of tips there as well. So we have actually had quite a few questions. One of them is, I recruit exclusively for engineers and struggling to find job boards. So this is in the Q&A. So if anyone has any engineers sort of job boards that they can recommend, please do go in and feel free to comment and like on that recommendation there as well. And Sarah, just on your one on the children's social care, which I know is going to be a really tough market to find people. Tom, Sarah's asking about experience with the programmatic and paid performance software. So is that something that you've got any sort of expertise that you might be able to briefly share with Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, without turning it into a Pinpoint sales pitch, that is what we do. So yes, hopefully some experience. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I get the challenge there, right? We work with lots of organisations, including people in children's social care, fun enough, that struggle with this, right? There's lots of niche markets; it's difficult to get in front of them. I'd say great that you're already using social media and job boards, and appreciate that they aren't always giving you necessarily the right candidates. I think there's two parts to that puzzle. One is looking at your candidate experience and making sure you're gathering the right information and making that frictionless. I think two is looking at how you're utilizing those channels. So like we talked before, if you're using Indeed as the job board, fantastic, because it's going to get you a very broad pool of candidates, not necessarily a particularly targeted set. I think look for industry specific job boards and platforms that are more focused on that sector as point one. I think point two, when we talk about social media, there's different types of social media. There's what we call organic, which is just putting a post on your page, which if I'm honest is going to do very little. And then there's paid, which is promotional advertising on Facebook, which does cost money, admittedly small amounts, but it allows you to be very granular about who you get in front of. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to use targeting on Facebook and other similar platforms to get you in front of people who are more likely to be the right fit. And I think we haven't got time to dig into the specifics of that right this second, but feel free to reach out, and happy to have a chat about that free of charge. I think the other thing is there's lots of different levels of maturity. So when we talk about programmatic, we can talk about base advertising. We also can talk about something called retargeting and nurture, which is super important to increasing your conversion. We can talk about using things like lookalike audiences to learn more from successful existing applicants and use that data to feed in more relevant quality applicants. And so there's a great deal there. I'm conscious of time, so we won't go much deeper than that, but please follow up and we can have a conversation about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tom. And yeah, lots of insight that you do have. So do feel free to reach out, Sarah, to Tom or any of those sort of Pinpoint guys directly.